In business today, three things to know. First, divine inspiration for foreign policy. President Obama meets with Pope Francis. We'll look at the president's use of trade policy as a foreign policy tool with a live report from Rome. Then, is this the Norma Rae moment for college athletes? A landmark federal ruling could open the door for unpaid college athletes to unionize. And part two of our series on North Dakota, how the state has learned to love fracking and the jobs it is bringing. Arise Exchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. President Obama's European trip took him to Rome and the Vatican on Thursday, where he met the Pope and the Italian Prime Minister. Mr. Obama's mission: work with the Pope on domestic issues they agree on, namely income inequality and immigration reform, and press ahead with the Europeans on an aid package for the Ukraine. The president welcomes a preliminary loan package from the International Monetary Fund to Ukraine that was announced on Thursday. Of course, this is all coming amid the backdrop of Russia seizing Crimea. Our Washington bureau chief, James Blue, is in Rome. Good evening, James. James.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi. Let's start with the president and the Pope. What does the president hope to accomplish with his meeting with the Pope today?
Really, what the president was doing was just sort of making common cause with someone who has the same values and who shares some of the same goals that he does. Reducing income inequality, trying to help the plight of the poor, and really just trying to create a better way for the numbers of people around the world who are suffering. It was a really good meeting. I spoke to someone at the White House shortly afterwards who said they were just struck at the personal rapport between both the president and the pontiff. And so he was really just sort of trying to pay his respects. And in his words, it was an honor to meet the pontiff.
We talked about this yesterday, a little bit about how the president is beginning to really shape foreign policy through trade. Tell us a little bit about the idea here of using free trade to sort of force through foreign policy issues.
Well, basically, what the president is trying to do is sort of connect both his foreign policy goals and his domestic policy goals. If the trade deal that is sort of on the table between the EU and the U.S. were to go through, some $273 billion a year would sort of benefit in the European sector, and some $130 billion a year would benefit in the United States. And the key here, it would create the largest trade zone in the world, the largest free trade zone, and the president said that would help Ukraine. So the current crisis and the standoff against Russia over the invasion into Crimea would be supported, and Ukraine would be supported by the benefits of this free trade deal. And so that's really just trying to help the U.S. economy and help Ukraine.
Yeah, what he's trying to do here, I take it, is to tell the Europeans that if you go ahead with a trade deal, you become less reliant on Russia, and he's clearly signaling the same message to Russia that maybe these states do not need them.
Yes, it works both ways, because it's saying to Russia, if you want to take Crimea, we can hit you where it hurts. We can cut into your into the oil exports that are a very large portion of the Russian economy. And so he really is playing both sides, and I think playing it quite well. The other issue in terms of using trade, if the sanctions on Russia were to be increased and then go into the oil and gas sector, what that would do would allow potentially for the first time the export of U.S. crude oil to Europe. You know, a lot of the folks up on Capitol Hill have been clamoring to get oil from the U.S. into Europe. This would be potentially an opening bid for that. The other possibility is liquefied natural gas, LNG. Germany gets most of its oil, most of its energy from LNG, and the hope is that if the sanctions were to come through, that they would be a boon, because Germany has no real ports that take in LNG. It all comes overland via Ukraine, and so this would be a big boon for U.S. business. And then finally, fracking. Fracking has sort of changed the game in the U.S. Energy sector. It is not present here in Europe. And the hope from the fracking industry, from the oil industry, is that by creating sanctions against Russia, that there may be the possibility for fracking in Europe. But this is all about foreign policy, and it's about satisfying the oil and gas industry in the U.S. It's a win both internationally and domestically.
Okay, our Washington Bureau correspondent James Blue, 3 countries in 3 days. Great job of reporting. We'll see you back here in New York tomorrow. The U.S. economy expanded less than expected in the fourth quarter of 2013. The Commerce Department revised the gross domestic product growth to 2.6%. Now, that is better than the original 2.4%, but less than the estimated 2.7%. Meantime, the labor picture continues to improve. The weekly jobless numbers coming in at 311,000 new claims, down 10,000. We'll dig through those numbers in a moment. Stocks took the data in stride in a choppy day of trading. Let's take a look at the final numbers. Dow Jones Industrial Average down 476 to 16,264. The S&P 500 off a little bit by 3.5 or so, and the NASDAQ closing at 4151. Our top stocks today. Microsoft launched its long-awaited Office for iPad today. The new software lets users create and edit documents, calculate spreadsheets, and design presentations and graphics through its Word, Excel, and PowerPoint programs. This is a major reversal of policy for Microsoft. Microsoft closing down 43 cents to 39.36. Tesla reaching an agreement with Ohio auto dealers to operate 3 company-owned stores in the state, heading off a bill that would have banned direct sales. Tesla off 364 to 207.32. Tesla's shares have been sliding lately. Lululemon stock surged today after reporting $521 million in revenue for the fourth quarter of 2013, $4 million higher than what analysts expected. Lululemon, which has had its own troubles, up 297 to 51.20. And commodities. Gold pulling back a little bit, and oil nudging up $1.09 to 101.35. For more on the economic data, Brian Jacobson from Wells Fargo Funds Management is with us today in the studio. Coming from Milwaukee to New York, you brought some of that Milwaukee cold weather with you, so we appreciate that.
Yes.
Brian, let's talk a little bit about the gross domestic product and what exactly it means. This is sort of the numbers that most are expecting.
Yeah, it was actually very much in line with what everybody was expecting, because this is actually about the second or third look at the GDP numbers for the fourth quarter. The major changes this time, and there weren't many, was mainly a little bit more spending on healthcare than what we saw in the previous reports. It's still pointing to somewhat slow growth, and I don't really expect that we're going to see much change from that.
Yeah, economists, and I wonder if you agree, are estimating about a 2.5% growth rate through the first half. But then there's some saying that there could be some significant acceleration in the second half.
Yes, and really the basis for thinking that there could be acceleration in the second half is because we do have somewhat of a low starting point here. We're having a bit of a payback from an inventory rebuild in the second half of last year, and so we're having a bit of a lull. But then the expectation is that as we clear out of some of this dirty data from the weather, that we should see a rebound, especially as businesses continue to invest in capital expenditures.
What is the GDP number that the Fed and the rest of us would sort of be happy with? Everybody says, well, you could grow the economy as much as you want, but that then brings inflation. So what is sort of the Goldilocks number that people are looking for?
Yeah, looking at the Goldilocks, you don't want it too soft, you don't want it too hot or too cold. And really, I think that people are looking for about 3%. The historical average over about the last 20 years is looking at around 3 to 3.3%. If we start getting up towards 3%, there are some concerns that maybe the economy will be overheating, that we could begin to see inflationary pressures, but I actually think the Fed wants to see a little bit of inflationary pressure here.
Well, they've talked about that a little bit because they're sort of trying to edge along interest rates a little bit, aren't they?
Yes, they are. And so really the expectation is that within about, maybe let's say next year at this time, they're going to begin contemplating raising interest rates. That is the target for the federal funds rate. I don't actually expect that when they start doing that, that's going to be bad for the economy. Because really, if you think about it, a 0% interest rate, if it goes to 0.25%, it's not like that's high.
Weekly jobless numbers also falling to a 4-month low. The numbers, weekly numbers, I know are very volatile and don't mean a whole lot. And frankly, I wish they wouldn't even issue them. Where does unemployment, though, look for March? And what do you think about April?
Sure. So I think that the March numbers are probably going to come in at around 138,000 or so. It's just that's about what's consistent with the weekly unemployment claims number and continuing claims. So it's not just those people who initially file, but those who have been collecting it. Actually, then the April numbers could look significantly better because in Congress, they're still debating over whether or not they should extend these unemployment insurance benefits. Because as it usually usually is you only collect benefits up to 26 weeks. Well, during the
about 99
crisis,
weeks or
yeah,
something?
it can go up to 99. Now it's been pared back periodically down to closer to about 78 weeks, and so that's expired.
And now that's key, because if those benefits expire, those people come out of the unemployment data, don't they?
Well, not necessarily. It depends upon what they choose to do. To get unemployment benefits, you have to be looking for a job. So the question is if you suddenly lose the benefits, are you going to stop looking for a job? Most studies have found that when people lose the benefits, about 40% of them actually get jobs. So it's almost like they just lower their standards a little bit.
Okay, I'm going to give you a moment to sort of tout your own horn here. You're here in New York for the Institutional Investor magazine. They're honoring you.
Oh, yes. I'm honored to be here with my wife and actually some of my colleagues at Wells Fargo. They're recognizing us as a rising star in the mutual fund industry. So it's a huge honor to be here, and it's wonderful to be here in the studio.
Well, we like having rising stars on the show.
Thank you.
Brian Jacobson, thank you so much. And coming up, calls to unionize college athletes. Are they volunteers playing for fun or really professionals helping their schools make millions? You're watching Rise Exchange.
Arise News is a different kind of network. We are able to tell our own stories, and we're able to cover stories in a way that other media outlets don't do. We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well. Arise News is a place where we can tell stories in an interesting, factual, inclusive way like no one else in the business can.
Because we live in a global, interconnected world, business news no longer stops when the markets close on Wall Street. And what we've discovered over the past few years in the financial crisis is that events and news that happen even in the smallest countries impact the United States and the world at large. As we bring together experts and analysts and thought leaders and CEOs in companies across many industries to not only provide the macroeconomic view, but news everyday people can use. A surprising ruling that could change college sports forever. The National Labor Relations Board in Chicago, that's a local board, ruled that football players at Northwestern University have the right to unionize, which would be a first in college athletics and could lead the way to athletes receiving compensation among other incentives. Emmett Gill, a national coordinator for Student Athletes Human Rights Project, is in Raleigh. Emmett, welcome to Arise Exchange. Talk to me a little bit about the legal implications here. How did the NLRB, this local board, come to the determination that athletes are employees?
Well, I think that the National Labor Relations Board decided that the amount of time that student athletes spend dedicated to their sport warranted the reality that they're an employee of the university. When you think about collegiate athletics and the reality that student athletes dedicate about 60 to 70 hours per week to their sport, and that they do this over the course of about 11 months per year, it's sort of easy to understand how the Labor Relations Board came to their decision.
And do you think the full board is going to back up that decision? And if so, what does it mean for all the other athletes?
I absolutely believe that the national branch of the Labor Relations Board is going to support this decision, in part because I think that public sentiment has changed when we think about the contributions of student athletes. In terms of how it's going to change the landscape, well, certainly we have to talk about some fundamental issues, such as health insurance, such as the cost of attending college. You have to realize that on average, when a student athlete leaves college, they're leaving $20,000 in debt. We also have to think about some other things that are typically given when we talk about unionization and labor rights, such as an employee assistance program. Because as we're well aware, oftentimes we see student athletes who become get in trouble.
Emmett, do you expect these athletes to actually receive paychecks? Because when you're talking about men's football, Division I, and Division I basketball, okay, you could see how the schools can afford to support that. But now turn your attention to Title IX sports and women's sports, which do not bring in the type of money that men's sports do. What do you do about the women then? Because now you really have a discrimination issue.
Well, with the Student Athletes Human Rights Project, we simply believe instead of student athletes receiving a paycheck, because we believe that it was shortchanged student athletes, we believe that they should have an opportunity to participate in the free market. which means that they should have an opportunity to assign endorsement deals, apparel deals, and appearances. And if we work under that model, then Title IX nor workman's compensation becomes an issue, because female student athletes would have the same opportunity.
Yeah, I wonder if that's where this is headed, that there's going to be a negotiated solution, because right now college athletes can't even have a job because there's concern that donors will give them money. Do you think that maybe we're headed for some sort of negotiated settlement here that will allow college athletes to earn money on the side and to, as you say, sign some endorsement deals that does not interfere with their universities?
Exactly. I don't think it's reasonable to think that universities are going to cut student athletes a check, because there are too many issues with regard to the value of a starter versus the value of someone who's coming off the bench versus a male and a female student athlete. But I think that what a union will provide student athletes with an opportunity to do is give them bargaining power.
What about the argument that, hey, these are volunteers. They're doing it because they're at school, they're learning. This is a sport. They're not professionals, and turning 18-year-olds into professionals is a bad idea?
Well, I have two responses to that. First of all, again, when you spend 70 hours a week thinking about participating in your sport over an 11-month period where you don't have a summer to rest, nor do you have the opportunity to spend the holidays with your family, that's not volunteerism. And secondly, I urge the public to think about the reality, think about the developmental assets that student athletes can gain if they have bargaining power and the ability to unionize.
And it's also important to note that the vast majority of student athletes do not have a professional career when they get out of school.
That's true. They don't have a professional career in athletics when they get out of school, but it's also important to note, and we're seeing this down here in the South at the University of North Carolina, nor do they leave school with a functional education. You see, what we're finding out right now in college sports is that student athletes are living up to their end of the bargain in terms of providing their athletic prowess. But when it comes to their education, their degree does not have the same value as their non-student athlete peers.
Yeah, I think that this is an issue that is going to move rapidly through the courts and through the schools. Emmett Gill, National Coordinator for Student Athletes Human Rights, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Time now for our business ticker, stories making headlines around the world. For the second time in 3 years, Citigroup has failed the Federal Reserve's stress test. Shares sank 5% today after the news Citigroup did not have enough capital to withstand an economic downturn. The Fed rejected Citigroup's financial projections and denied plans for the company to issue dividend payments and increase stock buyouts. Citigroup was the only one of the nation's top 5 banks to fail the test. Auto lender Ally Financial said the U.S. government will sell the bulk of its stake in the company. The expected initial public offering is valued at more than $2.5 billion. If it gets the price, it will mean the U.S. government earned more than $1 billion that it spent to bail the company out. Ally needed the bailout during the 2008 economic crisis because it invested heavily in subprime mortgages. The company was originally part of General Motors. Bank of America is paying billions more to settle claims it sold bad mortgages to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. B of A will pay $9.3 billion in cash and securities. Bank of America is just one of 18 financial institutions accused by the federal government of misleading Fannie and Freddie in the lead-up to the financial collapse. A big purchase in the airline industry. Japan's ANA has ordered 70 Boeing and Airbus airplanes at a list price of $17 billion. This is the largest order in the carrier's history and signals serious ambitions to become a world leader in air travel. The orders also reflects Japanese plans to ramp up tourism in the years leading up to the 2020 Olympics and expand Japanese travel abroad. Minimum wage workers in Connecticut are getting a raise. The state has passed a new minimum wage law promising $10.10 an hour. The Senate in Connecticut has made it the first state in the U.S. to promise workers $10.10 minimum wage. That makes it the highest minimum wage of any state, though some cities have higher levels. Taco Bell is rolling out its breakfast menu and tweaking one of its competitors in the process. A new ad campaign features dozens of men who share the same name as the mascot of McDonald's, Ronald McDonald, all saying how delicious the breakfast is. Take a listen.
My name is Ronald McDonald.
What do you think?
That's really good. I was surprised how good it is.
I love the new AM Crunch Wrap.
I'm Ronald McDonald.
Ronald
McDonald.
I'm Ronald McDonald, and I love Taco Bell's new breakfast.
A delicious new breakfast everyone can love, even Ronald McDonald.
Anyone named Ronald McDonald here? Speaking of McDonald's, the fast food giant is stepping up its game as well, at least in Switzerland. Mickey D's has started selling a sandwich called the Prime for a whopping $12. The 6.3-ounce Swiss beef patty is part of the chain's upscale signature lineup and is topped with bacon, coleslaw, arugula, and, quote, rustic mountain cheese, hopefully made in Switzerland, where they know their cheese. Some Swiss have complained about the price on McDonald's Facebook page, but McDonald's says it has no plans to bring the gourmet burger to the U.S. Guess we're just not classy enough. Ahead, if you're going to be an advocate for gun control, you probably shouldn't also be an arms dealer. Our favorite person of the day is next here on Arise Exchange.
Well, Arise is the only network that really covers comprehensively the African diaspora. It gives people in other parts of the world of color a chance to know about people here in the United States, us to know about them, and the world to know about us. So it's kind of an educational experience for everybody involved. Getting to know people through stories, through personal stories. You really get a chance to know what people are actually all about, what communities are about. How are we different? But more importantly, what commonalities we all share.
The great thing about Arise Entertainment 360 is that we cover the 360 of entertainment, food, fashion, lifestyle, culture. We're able to cover it all. And the thing I love most about the show is we're able to do a stunning combination of high and low. So we can talk about Rihanna on the red carpet, but we can also speak about high art with people like Sanford Biggers and Hank Willis. We actually spend quality time with our guests and we really get to know them. It's really intriguing because we get a 360 look at our guests.
Time now for our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention, and not for the right reasons. Today it is a gun control advocate who the FBI says is really a big-time arms dealer. It's a pretty good cover story, wouldn't you say? California State Senator Leland Yee is accused of selling political favors, bragging about his friendship with an arms dealer, and attempting to broker a multi-million-dollar weapons sale for a rebel group in the Philippines. All while he was speaking out against firearms and introducing gun control legislation. Yee's campaign manager is also charged in the scheme, as well as the leader of the G Kong Tong gang, known as Shrimp Boy, who was allegedly trying to secure the weapons. Yee was arrested as part of a sweeping sting that led to 26 people nabbed by the FBI. Among the charges against Yee, that he sold a state proclamation for $6,800, that he arranged a meeting between a donor and lawmakers to push for medical marijuana in exchange for cash, and for taking campaign donations well above the legal limit. Still, none of that makes him our favorite person. It is the brash attempt to broker heavy arms that is grabbing the headlines. State lawmakers are demanding Yee resign. You think? And so, for allegedly turning his political office into cash for guns, Leland Yee is our favorite person of the day. Next, why does North Dakota embrace fracking and take the jobs that come with it? You're watching Arise Exchange. Stay with us.
Arise serves underserved communities by bringing them news, information, sports, and entertainment from places that are becoming part of the world economy, that are becoming a part of the world voice, and decisions that are affecting things in the world that people care about. They care about the economy. They care about safety and security. And if you come to Arise and you watch our broadcast, these are the things we're going to bring to you every day, 24 hours a day.
One of the great things about Arise Entertainment 360 is we have this Arise to Your Health segment, which really focuses on the holistic approach of being healthy. So we do everything from working out to juicing to getting in shape by doing fun exercises like bouncing on a trampoline or wearing these bouncy boots on our feet when we're jumping all over the set. We've done karate, we've danced the weight off, we've done just about everything. And of course, I love when we eat on set, but we do it in a very healthy and clean way.
In part two of our interviews about North Dakota, we look at fracking and how the state has become an economic juggernaut since embracing the controversial method for capturing natural gas. Many states, such as New York, have held back over environmental worries and political pressure. Not North Dakota, where the unemployment rate is the lowest in the nation and heading lower. But with success comes some problems. Travis Brown, he is the author of How Money Walks and a contributor to Forbes magazine, and he joins us here in the studio. Travis, welcome to Arise Exchange.
It's a pleasure to be here.
How did North Dakota capture the fracking business? How did they go about doing this?
It's an interesting story, and maybe a happy accident of an entrepreneur out of Texas that spends a lot of his personal fortune, and thanks to him and others in the industry, we now know that our oil production pipeline and bandwidth is much, much greater than what anyone thought possible just 5-10 years ago.
So why does North Dakota get away with doing this without sort of the political controversy, unless there is some there, compared to New York, where Governor Cuomo has been studying this for year after year after year?
Well, we've been tracking a lot of different decisions by states. We know that some states, for example, choose not to penalize work by having no personal income tax. There are 9 like that. And similarly, in energy policy, we know that states make a choice about whether they're going to consume and produce that energy. In the case of Texas, they're very bullish. In the case of California, they have Monterey Shale formation that they choose not to use. North Dakota has made that choice, and they're making a big, big boom.
But Pennsylvania has also made that choice and has had a recent accident. Does that impact some of the decision-making in North Dakota at all?
They, for all appearances, are full throttle. Just today, national numbers here showing us producing in the United States about over 7 million barrels a day, and about 1 million of that is coming out of North Dakota.
And what has the state done, though, to make sure, from a regulatory standpoint, that there are not accidents? Because that could turn south very quickly.
Well, they have to comply with all the other federal energy regulations. There's issues around fracking that need to be addressed, and I think they're doing that. And so what you're seeing, however, is the massive amount of personal income.
This is a terrific graphic that you had
we
here.
were just...
We talk about personal income. Is this true that North Dakota is the only state in the nation after 5 years of having growth in personal income?
Well, what we're
and there's certainly inflation in North Dakota because the rents are higher than they are here in New York City.
That's right. What we're seeing here are BEA numbers, Bureau of Economic Analysis, projections on the 5-year personal income per capita growth, and you can see North Dakota's popping off the top of the charts here,
and
even exceeding.
And what kind of jobs are we looking at?
Well, we're looking at job employment narrowing below 3%. And I think even during this last 5 years, it hasn't been above 4.5%. We're seeing
quality jobs?
Quality jobs. We're seeing construction, hotels selling out and moving on to the next hotel before they even open because of the demand.
And how good are the wages there? And are they keeping pace with what appears to be a little bit of some price gouging going on in certain pockets of the state?
It's always an issue and concern when you have a boom this distinct, but I think that's what we're seeing here with the personal income growth we just had shown, is that there's real progress, real economic growth, several tens of thousands of jobs coming from the neighboring states.
And where
and
are they
even
coming
Eastern
from?
Europe.
Yeah, where are they coming from?
Neighboring states for sure, like Minnesota, Wisconsin, the other Dakotas.
Are displaced oil workers in Texas coming up?
Absolutely. And you have people from Colorado and others that are moving in. North Dakota has a huge economic opportunity.
And let me then ask you about where they come down on immigration, because I imagine a lot of these workers are also foreign workers.
Having traveled to the Dakotas, we hear stories that Eastern Europeans are immigrating in. We see a lot of evidence from international plays there. So I think everything's going to tighten up in that regard. And certainly Canada is involved with North Dakota as well.
Has the state done a good job from an infrastructure standpoint? Because the stories we're hearing is that there's not enough housing, that there's not enough roads, that this sort of caught them a little bit off guard. And I'm not familiar with North Dakota, so I don't know how active the legislature is. I don't know how involved the state government is.
Sure.
Were they prepared for all of this?
I would say no, but they're trying to do their best to accommodate the infrastructure needs. We know that residential housing is tight. We know that real incomes are way up in a lot of other service economies. The direct and indirect job creations from something of this nature are very distinct.
Travis, you know what the risk is here, because we've seen this in other states, that they hang their hat on one major industry. The industry goes through a slowdown or a recession, and then you have empty office buildings and people leave and severe depression. Is the state doing something to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well,
learning from like Colorado and the tech boom.
Sure. Well, we can draw a lesson in one case from Alaska that found big petroleum reserves in the 70s, and they did something very distinct by eliminating personal income tax. North Dakota has enough revenue from the severance royalties today to eliminate their personal income tax, and that would have the advantage of diversifying other economies.
And the corporate state taxes?
And they could do that as well. Corporate income taxes and a lot of other taxes could be eliminated. That would put less drag on all the other industries that would need to be diversified. In our next release, after How Money Walks, we're talking specifically about energy output per capita, we know it's a big impact on other industries.
Travis Brown, the author of How Money Walks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fascinating topic talking about North Dakota, a state many people hadn't paid attention to until recently. Tomorrow on Arise Exchange, we look at an inside look at a successful African entrepreneur marketing and selling unique items online and how he's helped others turn that dream into reality. That's the look at the final numbers on Wall Street. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Have a very good day here on Arise Exchange. That's correct.